Yeah, like I said, it's all gigs, and yes, some are more impressive and sound fancier, but to me it's not that much more exciting to be backstage of American Idol as it is backstage at the high school or whatever. It's still kind of exciting, and you're wanting the student to perform the best.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. After turnarounds as chief executive, the largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes. I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today. Welcome to Bold Encounters. I'm Mark Cook, and I have with me one of my heroes, Dean Kaelin. I'm going to try to make him cry in the introduction.
It's not hard.
I met Dean right after my father passed when I was in high school. He was both my football coach, and we had an alternative religious class across the street, seminary, and he was my seminary teacher. And I was troubled. I did not behave, and he really kept me from imploding. He was one of the 2 or 3 people that helped me from imploding. And I've always wanted to talk to you about business because I think you have a very exciting business. He is also a coach for Finalists of American Idol, and he is a coach for Disney's High School Musical, the TV series. And one of his favorite things he's ever done is jam with the Doobie Brothers. And he's performed with the top names in all music and coached them. Welcome, Dean. How are you?
Thank you.
That's a pretty good short bio, and it goes on and on. So give me 1 or 2 other favorite things that you have done, because we would all see the very notable things that everyone thinks are the best, but you have things in your heart that you think are really enjoyable and fun.
Well, it was interesting because I started out to be a performer myself, not a teacher. So the teaching has kind of come around the backside, and so it's great, but I look at those successes more of the successes of my students, and yes, I feel like I've had a hand in that. Like, David Archuleta came to me originally because he had a paralyzed vocal cord, and we were able to get him singing, and obviously singing well enough. He still has a paralyzed vocal cord, and it's an interesting story because I thought we fixed his paralyzed, that it was a temporary paralysis, but he still has it. But basically his body has developed a way to perform. It's sort of like the weak things will become your strength, because normally people have 2 vocal cords that come together, and he only has one that does all the work and the other one just sits there. And so if you would show his vocal cords to any ear, nose, and throat doctor, they'd say this kid would have trouble speaking, let alone singing.
At a world-class level.
Then he's this great singer. And so I feel that was a great, I helped out there. But a lot of times I don't want to step over and say, well, it was me, because it's the talent and it's that. But those things are kind of cool. But to me, it's always in the process of helping. But that was cool. Yeah, being involved with the show. Carmen Rasmussen was first, and I was down there involved with her and helping. But I don't know. To me, it's always been more about personal relations. But originally, I started out to be a performer. I did get a chance to do a tour in the Middle East with David, where it was just he and I. And we went around to all the troops throughout the Middle East and did shows and concerts. That was kind of a highlight, even though it was just for the troops. It wasn't on this big major scale. But working with the Disney kids has been fun. I got to work with Olivia Rodrigo before she became super famous. And
you helped her become super famous.
Well, I helped her make sure to get her voice together. And then even after the show, she was auditioning, so we did some online lessons and things like that. So it's always cool when people that you've helped become successful, which is interesting when you say that I had an impact in your life. That's probably the greatest thing, to feel like you've been helpful to someone in your life. And to me, at the end of the day, that's probably really all that matters. So, money's nice, and travel's nice, and fame and fortune's nice, but the fact that you maybe have helped people. One thing I know is that life's tough, and we're all trying to get through it. Yeah. And so, to me, that's kind of at the bottom of everything.
So, tell me, you've worked with Olivia Rodrigo. Mm-hmm. and yet you were almost, it seems like you almost got your way onto Dancing with the Stars. Tell me about that experience.
With Julianne Hough?
Yeah.
No, I'm not a dancer.
I know, I pictured you that way. Before we get to the business, we got to talk about you dancing.
No, that's the one thing. In fact, like I said, it's kind of interesting that I ended up becoming a voice teacher, because of all of my abilities, I thought voice is kind of one of the weakest ones. Which is a long story, but we'll get to that later. But anyway, so yeah, I met Julianne when she was 14, and she and Derek, they were dancing off in Europe, in England, and she came to my studio and said, I'm going to be famous. And I thought, okay, I've heard that before, but she did it. She acted on it. But yeah, and and then I followed her around and helped her as a voice coach. She was trying to pursue a vocal career as well, and she was doing some concerts and had a couple singles out, and so her voice wasn't keeping in great shape, so I got a chance to kind of follow her around and warm her up and do that for a while when she was doing the singing part as well. So yeah, I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of really talented people. So that's been a fun thing, and help them develop their talents. And again, originally I had set out myself to be not a performer per se, but I wanted to be a musical director that's kind of like a person behind the stars, the one that kind of arranges and sings backup and conducts the orchestra. Those are things I was kind of good at, making the performer look good. But really, as far as the singing part of it, that kind of came from the side. But it's still kind of in the same process of helping people develop their talents and become all that they can be. So I guess that's maybe one thing that's gone through my life with whatever I've done. It's always been trying to kind of help people and develop people, whether it's through coaching or teaching, religion or whatever. So
yeah, well, and it's nice to have a accidental backup that you end up leading with the Goo Goo Dolls and such. So you've touched my life in a couple of ways before we get to business. You've touched my son. He pondered a career. He was cum laude in pre-med, and he has got such a great voice that you called me 3 hours later and said, you better support that kid. So he's been working on it, and his band's Cal Joe, and he is doing great, and you were effective there. And then my own wife, who started teaching, but then turned it into a vocal academy, doing all sorts of things, and came to you, and you've been really pivotal with that. And so we love you. And my admiration for business, I ended up teaching entrepreneurship at night to your son randomly at a university, and got to know him, and then you came. And when I heard your story business-wise, because I'm in business and leadership, I really was impressed by it. So that's why we're here.
Well, as far as working with people and helping people, I went down to, I think I was raised like so many of the kids are now to become famous. Like I said, I was a year younger than Donny Osmond and Michael Jackson, and so I saw them and I thought that's going to be me, because I started performing when I was 3. And, regularly when I was 5, started performing professionally when I was 9. So I thought, I'm on this course to be a professional performer. And so out of college, I went down to LA to live my dream, and didn't really like LA, and didn't like really the people. And it's just, it seemed fake, and I hated the traffic. And I really had to reevaluate, is this really what I want? And so as I moved back to Salt Lake, I came home with what I call the it's all gigs philosophy. In other words, some gigs are for like 20,000 people and they're really impressive. And other gigs is like you're playing just in church, or you're playing for the care center. But they're all gigs. And so some of them are impressive than others, but you're still trying to perform and do a great job and make people happy. And so I think it's the same thing with me when I'm working. I work with real famous people, and that's great, but they're real people. And, some of them are nicer than others. And I'm working with people that are just beginners or wannabes. But to me, it's the same. And I think I don't treat people differently because they're famous, or, look at me, this is a big famous thing. And I think that's kind of probably helped me be grounded, and I think is kind of a major philosophy in life that's rolled into business as well, and I think helped me make successful, because I care about the person and what I'm giving them and how I can help them. And I always thought, I never planned on being a voice teacher. I always knew I'd be in the music business, but the voice teaching thing just sort of came about from the side, and we can talk about that in a minute. But the fact that I always knew I'd be in the music business, but I always thought, well, people have asked me to teach, and so I'll help them, and when they stop asking, I'll do something else, because there's other things I like doing, but then they just kept asking. But I really think as far as a core principle in my success is really wanting what's best for the individual and treating people the same, rather, because we all have goals and dreams, and whether you're just trying to make your school choir or sing in the talent show, or you're on American Idol, or you're on the Grammys, to me it's kind of all the same. So it seems fancier or a bigger deal, but to me, I care as much about this person that's just trying to get their audition as I do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's really an important principle. The most important principle in business is to make sure you know how to dramatically help your ideal customer. And that sounds very businessy, but that person is a person. And it's almost like what Rick Rubin says, that you're creating a gift to the heavens and God, and if that one person or the 100,000 important people love it, so be it. But you bring your best all the time, it sounds like.
Yeah, like I said, it's all gigs, and yes, some are more impressive and sound fancier, but to me it's not that much more exciting to be backstage of American Idol as it is backstage at the high school or whatever. It's still kind of exciting, and you're wanting the student to perform the best, which kind of brings us, I guess, full circle to you. And it's been interesting to do this interview, because I really had never thought of my life in this context before, and you've kind of, the 40 years later, bringing it all full circle around again. But for whatever reason, I connected with you. Obviously, we were doing football, and you were a talented athlete. So it's kind of like, oh, this kid's talented. I want to help him. He's going to help my team. And so there was an automatic draw to you. And sometimes you can't really explain why you like some people right off the bat. But for whatever reason, I just always felt very connected to you. And it seemed like we got along, and we got each other, even though I was supposed to be the teacher or the coach and you were the kid. And so I didn't really look at you as a kid with problems or a kid I needed to help. I just looked at you as this really good guy that I liked, and I care about people, and I think that that's the most important thing at the end of the day. And so, how can I help this person reach his potential? And in so doing, I'm kind of reaching my potential as well. So,
well, it's really touching. You were very young back then. You were. I was 15.
I thought of myself as old. I was 23, and I thought I was so old.
I still don't think of myself as 23, so that's very impressive that you thought you were old.
I still think of myself as in my late 20s. Yeah. I wonder who the old guy is in the mirror. But like I said, I felt so much more mature than these high school kids I was teaching.
You were more mature than
and I look back and I think I'm only like 7 years older than these kids. It wasn't,
Well,
it was weird.
I think the first time we connected was when you decided to don a practice uniform in the scrimmage. And I was on both offense and defense, so I happened to be on defense when you were playing quarterback. And I got a chance to lay the wood on you.
Actually, I think that's probably illegal. We probably weren't allowed to do that.
Probably be on the news. But you did get hurt, and Larry Gilwick's tried that in rugby once too. So it's a thing. So I want to get back before we go into the business, since you brought it up. One of the attractions to coming and interviewing is to hear your short version of some couple of key moments when I was so young and so troubled. My life was going along fine. I loved football. I was much better at that than academics, and I just loved it. And it was my brother's love, and I loved them and was doing it. And then my father was told he had cancer, and we fought through that. But you arrived late in that part of my life, and there was a day when he passed where I was supposed to go to my first high school football game that year. And you were on the other side, and I've never even asked you about your perspective on what happened that day. So tell me what happened as you were sitting there in the locker room waiting, and I wasn't there, and I was going to catch the opening kickoff or be on the offense the second play, either way, and your thoughts. And then your awareness of what was going on, and what your perspective was when I finally showed up out of the blue to start the game. Tell me your thoughts on that, Dave.
Well, I knew vaguely what was going on with your dad, that he has cancer, but I didn't really know at that time how serious it was or how close to death or anything he was. I just knew that was something that was kind of happening. And again, my relationship with you at that time was as a football coach mostly, and like putting the best football team together that we could and get ready. And so it's kind of like, okay, I didn't know what had happened and why you weren't there, but what changes do we need to make in the game plan and all that kind of stuff. So I was delighted that you came, but I was also real surprised when you came as well. So, and yeah, football and winning the game was important, but what was more important was you and what you're going through. And I was surprised that you were there. It's like, are you okay to play? And I always was raised with a real commitment to the team. Once you commit to the team, you commit to the team. In fact, you probably don't know, but that year I was coaching football, I got invited to play for the King of Thailand.
Wow.
And turned it down because I was coaching football. Because I thought, how can I talk about committing to the team and to a group and then leave for 3 weeks to go to Thailand and play for the King of Thailand?
Wow.
And nobody really knows that story, but
I do now.
But so I was, and maybe that was one thing that actually drew me to you as well, that here you're going through this hard moment and hard time, and yet you're still committed to the team and you're there. So that's...
Well, he made me go.
Your dad did?
Yeah, he couldn't even hardly speak. He had literally died twice. My brother had picked him up and carried him into his room once, and then he passed again, and I carried him in, and the doctor came and gave him morphine, and before I left, he had come back to consciousness, and he couldn't really talk, and he was smiling at me, and he kept pointing, and it was very clear what he was saying, and I'm like, no, I'm not going, obviously, and finally the whole room was saying, look, he's not going to stop, he really wants you to go, and so he sent me on. I won't tell the whole story.
So I get that, because like I said, my dad was like, and just ingrained into that kind of, those principles of just being dependable and committing and all that stuff coming through for each other. So anyway,
let me just say, so I've told that whole story, well, much of it, on a different podcast called The Gentleman's Project, and I don't want to really tell it here, but let's cut from there. And so here I come, and pick it up from your perspective. I'm showing up to the field, and what were you thinking?
Well, thrilled that you were there, but wanted to know, first of all, are you okay? And are you okay to play? And thrilled that you were there, and excited that you were there. And I don't even remember how the game turned out or what happened, but because you're an essential part of the team, and like I said, a very talented athlete. But then also at the end, following, once you found out that your father had passed away, and so I don't know. It's It's an interesting experience. We don't plan out those things in our life and how we're going to react, but I think I've always tried to care about the individuals more, and winning games is important and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, maybe that was just something that subconsciously kind of connected me to you at that time either. But I never saw you as this troubled kid.
Oh, I was.
And maybe I don't, didn't know all the stuff that you were going through and everything, but you were just somebody that I saw potential in, and somehow just felt like I'd connected with you, and so it was always very easy and very natural for me to care about you and what you're going through. And again, I pictured myself, because I was in a position of authority, being a coach and the teacher, even though I wasn't all that much older.
Yeah.
And just, so whatever I could do to help. And again, it's as far as in a way helping me to be successful in things that I was trying to do as well. So.
Well, we challenged you, that's for sure. So, so after that happened, it was kind of a numb period, and then there was a little bit of a decline in my behavior and such. And one of the pivotal moments at that moment in my life was when I was very misbehaved in your class, and yet after you pulled me into your office and asked me how I was doing, and wouldn't let me just say fine. You kept digging in, and You didn't even care about the class preceding our conversation. Tell me about your, not as much about me and mine, you may not even remember my specific event, but tell me about why you as a person and a musician and a human and a leader did that. Like no one else was doing those sorts of things to me.
I don't know. I've never in my life just said, okay, I'm going to focus on that. I think that as I've thought about life in general, what I do realize is that it's tough. And that's the one thing that we all have in common, is that everybody's going through tough things. You never know what people are going through. Mm-hmm. And so I've tried not to react to the bad behavior or something, because I figure there's something behind that. And again, for someone like you that I liked, thought you're a good kid, it's kind of like, okay, so what's going on with this? And I was never one, whenever I'm in a leadership position, I never liked what I call the Sunday school answers. It's, you know, when I say to somebody, how are you doing? And they say, I'm fine. I go, you know, that's never been a good answer for me. It's like, what's going on in your life? In fact, for a long time, and I stopped doing this because it's probably a bad idea, but people would say to me, how you doing? I said, terrible.
I'm glad you stopped.
Because half the people don't even really notice that you said that. They just kind of go on, because they're not really paying attention. They're like, oh, and if they do, they go, wait, what? And you go, no, I'm just kidding. But, you know, just to kind of get them to think about, you're asking a question, but do you really care? And so I always wanted to know, honesty was really important to me. So it's kind of like, how are you really doing and what's going on? And so I guess, and it was also the same with my kid. I've got one daughter that I'm really glad that she was born to me, because any other dad probably would have killed her. But she had something that I called creative reality. Other people would call it lying. But you could see her as a little girl take the cookie. You could see her eating the cookie. She could have crumbs on her dress. And you'd say, why did you take that cookie? And she said, I didn't take that cookie. I saw you take that cookie. No, I didn't take that. You have crumbs on your dress. No, I didn't. And it was really interesting, because I was fascinated. I thought, what is going on in that brain of hers that's allowing her to turn that around? And I thought, she really believes she didn't take the cookie, and I saw it. And so instead of being frustrated by that and like beating her, it was like I was just so curious about what's going on in that brain. And I think that's maybe part of me, is that I've always been curious about people. And so not that you reacted, but why did you react that way? What's caused you to do? That's what interests me. Let's get behind it. And I guess that's probably helped me in business as well, as, you know, as a voice teacher. It's not like, okay, you're doing this wrong. And yeah, well, thanks. I knew I was doing that wrong. But how do you fix that? What's causing the problem, and how do you get behind that? So my initial reaction was, you know, good kid, talented athlete. I felt connected to you. I liked you. And it was like, okay, so what's going on here? And let's try to figure this all out. And even though I couldn't really relate, you know, I've lost my dad since then, but I hadn't lost my dad and didn't know exactly what you're going through. Just, I guess, I don't know, to be there and to try to be understanding and figure stuff out. I don't know. That's one of the most important things.
Well, for the 1000th time, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate it. It meant everything to me. It was a big, small little moment in life. It was a really, you know, one of my method I do in business is called bold encounters. And encounter is a consequential interaction, not just a normal interaction. And it was one of the big encounters I had as a
There was a man that I really respected, and I heard him give a talk one time, and he said, he said, I think I'm a great father. I really work with my kids well, and I'm doing the best I can as a father. I said, but this is him talking, I'm convinced that there has to be at least one adult figure in every kid's life that comes through at the right moment that's not his parents. As important as the parents in the family is, and he calls these watershed moments in the lives of these people. Mm-hmm. And it was really important that we be prepared at that points in our life to be that person. And a lot of times we don't even realize that we were that person or that we made that difference. But he was convinced that in every kid's life there was somebody that at some moment makes a difference, that helps that kid go the right direction or not if they're not there, if they don't step up. And he had actually pointed to me. We happened to be speaking in the same meeting, and I had no idea he was going to talk about that as being that person in his son's life who, again, had gone to East High, had moved from Florida, didn't know any kids, felt alienated, felt problem. And, I showed this kid a few chords on the piano and a couple things like that really just kind of changed his life. And he's now this world-class doctor and doing great things. But yeah, just being there at the right time. And I think that's something that we need to do just as human beings, but as business people as well. And I think that attitude then ties into our success as business. Yeah. And so
Caring.
I think it all kind of rolls in.
It's a beautiful idea, a mentor that is a leader or anyone that creates a watershed event in your life.
My dad used to tell me that I gave way too many things away. He said, "You're always giving stuff away." And I think he was from a different time period. He grew up during the Depression and you just had to scrape and fight for your existence. And he would get mad at me. He says, "You're always giving stuff away." And I don't know.
Good for you.
I think it comes around eventually. I think my reputation is one thing that's maybe most important to me. Yeah. So I think the thing that probably hurts me most is when someone misunderstands me or I'm accused of doing something I didn't do. That's the stuff that really bugs me. So
thank you for joining us for the first half of this interview. Now go to markspencercook.com/podcast or your favorite podcast provider or YouTube to see the second